Well, we're continuing on in the book of Genesis, and today is a very familiar story. Although sometimes I wonder, generally speaking, do people really know this whole story, or is it just sort of like images? We're going to talk about the flood today, Noah and the flood. And it's a pretty long passage. It's like 3.5, 6, 7, 8, 3.5 chapters of the Bible. So we're not going to read all of that. So we have a very special treat today. My son Drew is going to come, and he's going to read to us the story of Noah in the way that he learned it when he was a little guy. Here, right here. Oh, we'll do it right here. All right. Okay. So you can follow along up on the screen. We got the screen there. There we go. Okay. Here we go. First slide. Next slide.
A long time ago was a man named Noah who loved and worshiped God. This faithful man followed God's commands even when they seemed quite odd. Most people had become very bad. They ignored their Creator Lord. They were full of vice, laughed at God's advice, spreading hate which God deplored.
Noah, with dread, God sadly said, I've decided to make it rain. A flood will swirl over the entire world and get rid of sin and pain. I'll wash the world clean. No one will be seen, just you and your family of 8. But you'll need to embark, build an awesome ark. Immediately, don't wait.
I will not ask why, was Noah's reply. I'll do as you instruct. With the helping hands of my family band, an ark we shall construct. With pegs and boards, Noah learned from the Lord exactly what to do. What wood to prize, what shape and size, God's ship just grew and grew. You're sick in the head, the neighbors said, to build that big ship here. Where will it float, that gigantic boat you've worked on year by year? Then God said,
My son, your work's nearly done. Your humongous ark is strong. Now search trees and layers for thousands of pairs of creatures to bring along.
Arriving by twos, they walked, crawled, and flew, the animals from lions to mice. When God shut the door at the thunder's roar, Noah was glad for his advice. Rain caused great fright, 40 days and nights, flooding low and high. The waters came down over forest and town, but the ark stayed snug and dry. Imagine the hoots and snorts and toots of the animals large and small. The lions that roared, birds and bees that soared. Our Lord God loved them all. God stopped the rain, but the ark remained afloat for months after that. Then it hit, kerplop, upon the top of a mount called Ararat. Next, God's wind blew, and the sea withdrew. Noah sent out a dove that returned with a leaf to the crew's relief, a sign of the Lord's great love. Noah's family at last was free and stepped out on the land quite dry. They worshipped God with praises loud as a rainbow filled the sky. God promised then that never again would he flood the entire earth. Now our faith we base on baptismal grace and the gift of Jesus' birth. Our water comes down from a Christ-based crown. God's love makes us remark. Since you say so, Lord, we'll trust you, Lord, like Noah who built the ark.
Yeah. All right. Good job, Drew. Thank you. You can go to Sunday school now if you want to. Yeah. Give some few high fives on the way out. There you go. All right. So there's the story of Noah and the flood. And one of the things that fascinates me a little bit about this story is how it is so child-friendly, sort of. Right? I can't remember, Chuck, if I put the pictures of the nurseries in there. Do I have those slides in there? I do. Okay, go. Yeah, so like nursery-themed, flood-themed nursery stuff, right? And we had that when we were kids. When Micah was little, somebody gave us some Noah-themed stuff, and we had it in the room, right? Here's another picture. Next slide. Yeah, there you go. So, right, we do, right? On the mural on the wall, right? This is kind of how we teach the story of Noah and the flood. But it's actually a really horrific story, isn't it? Right? If we really wanted to show kids what the flood looked like, it would be more something like this, right? Or the next one, right? Right? This is what the flood would have looked like, right? And I get it, right? It's animals and boats are cute, right? And so we turned it into a cute little thing, but it is a really, tragic kind of a story. So what do we do with that, right? And some people push back on that, right? Some people say, well, if that's what God is like, if God is the kind of God who would destroy the entire planet, essentially, that's not the kind of God that I want to follow. So that's one of the challenges that people have when it comes to this story. People also bring up all kinds of logistical challenges when it comes to the story of Noah and the ark. And so I think it's important just to name them because people think about these kinds of things. And maybe you think about these kinds of things because I think about these kinds of things. So I've got 5 kind of logistical problems when it comes to the way the flood is described to have happened. Number 1, if the flood were severe enough to reach 17,000 feet, which is how high it would have had to go in order to cover Mount Ararat, in 150 days, it would have had to rise at the rate of over 100 feet per day, almost 5 feet per hour. Even if such a rapid rise were possible and could be sustained over a 5-month period, it would have created currents that would have made survival in the ark unlikely. Interesting. Number 2, those searching for the ark, right? Explorers, archaeologists have searched for the ark on Mount Ararat, which is a real place. Those searching for the ark have had to use very sophisticated mountain climbing equipment to scale the heights of Mount Ararat, and at times have had to abandon the effort. How would Noah and his family and animals such as elephants and hippopotami make the trek down the mountain? And how did they make their way across mountain chains and over deserts to return to their native habitats? Number 3, what did the carnivores eat until their prey populations were replenished? There's only 2 of everything, right? The lions can't eat the zebras, right? Got to let the zebras rebuild. Okay, number 4, if the ark ran aground on the still submerged summit of Mount Ararat on the 17th day of the 7th month, that's chapter 8, verse 4, and the tops of the mountains became visible on the first day of the 10th month, chapter 8, verse 5, so 2.5 months later, the water receded only 15 feet in those first 75 days. Yet it would have had to recede another 17,000 feet in the next 75 days because by the first day of the first month, the earth was dry. Chapter 8, verse 13. Anybody losing their faith yet? Last one. The dove flew down into a valley to get an olive leaf, only growing in low elevations, in chapter 8, verse 11. How did it manage to fly back up to 17,000 feet to the ark? Doves are not physically equipped to fly at those altitudes. All right, so what do we do with all of that? This is one of the challenges of this story, right? And listen, we've talked about this the last few weeks. There are also challenges with the Adam and Eve story and the 6-day creation story and the Cain and Abel story. Where did Cain get his wife and all those kinds of things, right? And there are some challenges with this story. You may also have heard that other ancient civilizations had flood stories, and there are different ways that people have explained it, perhaps because maybe there was a flood and different cultures have memories of that flood, and that's a possibility. Or maybe a flood story is something that, for whatever reason, in the ancient world really grabbed people's imaginations and really connected with them in some deep way. And maybe God said, I'm going to give you guys a flood story to help you understand, again, who I am, who you are, what's wrong with the world, and what hope we have for the world. Right? So, listen, God could have done any of this. God is omnipotent, right? It means he can do anything. He could have done any of this. But even if this is, whether it's meant to be a story of an actual historical event, or if it's a story that God gave us to help us understand him better, either way, The important thing is, what do we learn about God from this story? So that's what we're going to talk about, right? What do we learn about God, about ourselves, about the world, about what's not working with the world, and about what hope we have? All right, so let's start with, I'm not going to read the whole story because, like I said, it's like 3.5 chapters. I'm going to read a few verses here and there to kind of touch on the things that we're going to talk about. So, chapter 6, starting in verse 5, this is sort of the preface to the flood story. The Lord saw how great the wickedness of the human race had become on the earth, and that every inclination of the thoughts of the human heart was only evil all the time. The Lord regretted that he had made human beings on the earth, and his heart was deeply troubled. So the Lord said, I will wipe from the face of the earth the human race I have created, and with them the animals, the birds, and the creatures that move along the ground, for I regret that I have made them. What we see right here in the very beginning of the story of Noah and the flood is a contrast between two hearts, the heart of human beings and the heart of God. Let me just read the first couple of verses one more time. So the Lord saw how great the wickedness of the human race had become on the earth, and that every inclination of the thoughts of the human heart was only evil all the time. Right? That's the human heart. Only evil all the time. Verse 6, the Lord regretted that he had made human beings on the earth, and his heart was deeply troubled. Right? The human heart, its inclination is only evil all the time, and God's heart is deeply troubled. Sometimes when we hear this story told, it's told in such a way to say that look at how angry God was with those people. Look at how vengeful and wrathful God can be to take that kind of action because human beings are evil, so you better watch out, right? But this is not a portrayal of an angry God. This is a portrayal of a grieving God. God created this beautiful world, right? This beautiful creation of which he said, it is very good. And then Adam and Eve, ate from that tree, broke shalom, Cain and Abel, Lamech, and it just kept getting worse and worse and worse. And it's like God is weeping. What happened? What happened? Sometimes the story is portrayed as though it's a crisis for humanity. Oh no, what's humanity going to do? That's not what this story is. This story is a crisis for God. God is having a moment of crisis. What should I do? What should I do? He says, I don't know what to do. Maybe I'll start over. I'll wipe the world clean, right? I'll just wipe everything off the face of the earth. And he does it not with anger, but with grief. With grief. It's a dark place to start this story. But there's hope. Right? We're immediately introduced to just a sliver of hope. So, verse 8, immediately following what we just read, it says, but Noah found favor in the eyes of the Lord. This is the account of Noah and his family. Noah was a righteous man, blameless among the people of his time, and he walked faithfully with God. Right? Noah is the alternative possibility for what humanity has become, right? Humanity's inclination has become only evil all the time, except that there's Noah. So maybe there is some hope for humanity, right? Noah is described kind of beautifully. Noah was a righteous man. That just means he did the right thing, right? Sometimes we hear righteous and we think self-righteous, and there's a little bit of a negative connotation. Just meant he did the right thing. He was righteous. He was blameless, he was faithful, he walked faithfully with God, and he was obedient. A couple other verses. So God goes to Noah and he says, I want you to build this ark because here's what I'm going to do. And so, verse 22 of chapter 6, Noah did everything just as God commanded him. God gives him some more instructions. Chapter 7, verse 5, a few verses later, and Noah did all that the Lord commanded. right? Noah was the righteous, blameless, faithful, obedient man. This was the hope for humanity, that maybe this is what a human being could be. And so God has some hope for humanity. Okay, I'm going to save Noah. I'm going to save his family. And we'll try again. We'll try again. Okay, well, you know the rest of the story. Real quick summary, which we already heard from Drew. God sends the flood. It rains for 40 days and nights. The waters rise. Noah and his family and the animals are in the ark. And then it stops raining, and then they're floating on the water. And then after 150 days from the start, the waters begin to recede. The ark lands on the top of Mount Ararat. Noah sends out a few birds. After the last bird that he sends out does not return, he says, okay, it's safe to go out. God opens the ark, everybody comes out, and they lived happily ever after. Right? Yeah, kind of, but anyway, we'll talk more about that next week. It does have a good ending. It has actually quite a good ending, because what happens is, in the context of this story, something changes. Something goes from bad to good. So what was it that went from bad to good? I want to read to you the end of chapter 7, the last few verses here. This is while they're still floating on the ark. So starting in verse 20, the waters rose and covered the mountains to a depth of more than 15 cubits. So that's about 23 feet. So all the mountains of the earth were at least 23 feet below water. That's what this is saying. Every living thing that moved on land perished. Birds, livestock, wild animals, all the creatures that swarm over the earth, and all mankind. Everything on dry land that had the breath of life in its nostrils died. Every living thing on the face of the earth was wiped out. People and animals and the creatures that move along the ground and the birds were wiped from the earth. Only Noah was left, and those with him in the ark. The waters flooded the earth for 150 days, right? So total destruction. Again, except for Noah and those on the ark. So we got to put ourselves in Noah's shoes for a moment here. Noah and his family and the animals are on the ark. It stopped raining, 110 days ago, right? Because we're at day 150 here. After 40 days of rain, they're just floating, right? On this global ocean, no land anywhere. And they're like, okay, now what? Now what do we do? And I can imagine them thinking and praying and saying, hello, we're still here, right? Everything had been destroyed, right? Noah and his family are all that's left, and they're wondering, what now? What do we do now? And what kind of a God is this who would destroy the entire planet? And how are we now to relate to this God? Then, here's where the change comes. It starts with a very beautiful word, chapter 8, verse 1, but, right? But something is about to change. The earth had been destroyed. God did the only thing he could think to do to try to make a change, but something is about to change. Verse 1, chapter 8, verse 1, but God remembered Noah and all the wild animals and the livestock that were with him in the ark, and he sent a wind over the earth, and the waters receded. Right? When it seemed like God had forgotten the world, God had maybe even forgotten Noah and those on the ark with him, but God remembered. This is one of the things I think that God wants us to know about him. This is a God who remembers us. God remembered Noah, and God remembers us. I've never been through a flood like this. Some people in the world have been through floods, not this kind of a flood, but devastating floods. We've all been through hard times. People have been through fires in LA recently. And it's in those times that we wonder, does God even remember me? Has God forgotten me, right? Here we learn that this is a God who remembers us. But God remembered Noah, and God remembers us. So, something went from bad to good. What exactly was it that went from bad to good? Was it people? Did people change after the flood? Let's see, chapter 8, verses 20 to 22. Let me read that to you. This is after they come out of the ark, and Noah is like, whew, we're safe. Thank you, Lord. And he wants to worship God, and so he builds an altar. It says, then Noah built an altar to the Lord, and taking some of all the clean animals and clean birds, he sacrificed burnt offerings on it. The Lord smelled the pleasing aroma and said in his heart, never again will I curse the ground because of humans, even though every inclination of the human heart is evil from childhood. And never again will I destroy all living creatures as I have done. As long as the earth endures, seed time and harvest, cold and heat, summer and winter, day and night will never cease. So, we see the two hearts again, the heart of humanity and the heart of God. The Lord smelled the pleasing aroma and said in his heart, never again, right? Never again will I curse the ground because of humans, even though every inclination of the human heart is evil from childhood. Has the human heart changed? Nope. I mean, Noah was a righteous man, but as we see the story progress, we end up back at the Tower of Babel. We'll talk about that in a couple weeks. And the human heart just continues, right, in this downward spiral deeper and deeper into sin. The people didn't change because of the flood, but the heart of God changed. He said, never again. I will never do that again. Nope. I will find another way. I will find another way. And so, what does he find? What does he do? A little bit later, we have Abraham. It's chapter 12. And then the people of Israel. And then finally, we have Jesus. Yeah, that's right. That's right. I will never do that again. I will never destroy the earth again. And God really makes sure that Noah knows it, and he really makes sure that we know it. So let me read kind of the last part of the story here, chapter 9, verses 8 to 17. It says, then God said to Noah and to his sons with him, I now establish my covenant with you and with your descendants after you, and with every living creature that was with you, the birds, the livestock, and all the wild animals, all those that came out of the ark with you, every living creature on earth. He doesn't just make a covenant with people, he makes a covenant with every living being on the planet. I'm promising to the cats and the dogs and the lions and the tigers and the bears and the snails and the beetles, right? I will never do this again. I establish my covenant with you. Never again will all life be destroyed by the waters of a flood. Never again will there be a flood to destroy the earth. And God said, this is the sign of the covenant I am making between me and you and every living creature with you, a covenant for all generations to come. I have set my rainbow in the clouds, and it will be the sign of the covenant between me and the earth. Whenever I bring clouds over the earth and the rainbow appears in the clouds, I will remember. I will remember my covenant between me and you and all living creatures of every kind. Never again will the waters become a flood to destroy all life. Whenever the rainbow appears in the clouds, I will see it and remember the everlasting covenant between God and all living creatures of every kind on the earth. So God said to Noah, this is the sign of the covenant I have established between me and all life on earth. It's like God is saying, I promise, I promise, I promise, I promise, I promise, I promise I will never do that again, right? Now, does this mean that God changed? Well, the way the story is told, yeah. I believe that Jesus Christ is the same yesterday, today, and forever. And I do believe in the unchanging nature of God. And that's why I kind of feel like this story is a story, sometimes we wonder, will God smite us, right? I mean, I remember watching Bruce Almighty. Everybody seen that movie? Smite me, O mighty smiter, right? And we think that God is the kind of God who wants to, or will at least, destroy people and things and planets because he's angry. But that is not what we see in this story. I think this is God's way of saying, you don't have to be afraid of that. You don't have to be scared that I'm going to wreck you or wreck your life or wreck the planet, right? No, I'm with you. I'm for you. I want to heal you. Yes, things are bad. Yes, the inclination of the human heart is still evil from childhood. Yep, you guys haven't changed, but you don't have to be afraid of me. You don't have to be afraid of me. It doesn't mean that God isn't strong, right? But you don't have to be afraid of me. So, I think what we get from this story, right, is an understanding of God's posture towards us, right? God's posture is not one of destruction. God's posture is not one of domination. God's posture is not one of fury, right? God's posture is a posture of grace, compassion, love, hope, promise, right? God is with us.